Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I'm Requiem. Can
Don't
I
ask.
be?
Don't. We're here. We're here. It's all a blur. I don't know why. We're driving in the sewers. Just some things in life you just have to accept.
These? Why? How are these sewers even big enough for your car? Like, I know everything's bigger in Texas, but this seems unnecessary.
I mean, but is the saying everything is bigger in Texas to the degree to which it is necessary? I'm pretty sure the saying is just that everything is bigger in Texas, which apparently includes the sewers. Like,
Yeah, but
to the point where we can drive a car through them. I
is
look.
this how we get to Texarkana?
Well, we have to go through the city of Dreadful Night, right? Take a stop at the. Oh, that was close. Yeah, then we drive down the highway with the hostel by it. I forget the number. It's some kind of number. I don't live around here. I don't know what the highways are numbered. And then we have to drive through. It just says the Texas sewer. But,
That's
I mean, I found this little map quest printout during my vision quest while I was high on the drugs that Fang Requiem gave me, which haven't led me wrong yet. So,
he does have pretty good drugs. Uh, and admittedly, these sewers are better than the sewers in it.
I mean, so far there's no clowns in them, so yeah, there's that.
The It
Yeah.
movie was probably the best version of It you can get. Like, there's a good 400-page novel in It the novel, and but unfortunately, It is like 1,200 pages long.
It is a ludicrously thick book.
And like, he's focused so much on the adult portion. The adult portion is much worse than the child portion, and the adult portion also takes the air out of the child portion because you know how stuff goes. You know the one kid doesn't survive. You know obviously they defeat it the first time, but also like they don't do anything new in their like the adult portion has them like all their arcs reversed.
Yeah, they just do it again, but this time as adults
Like
who are still scared of a demon clown.
like Bev, her whole arc as a child is overcoming her abusive father, and then her arc as an adult woman is she's got this abusive relationship with her husband. It's like the whole point was she overcame that, and it's just sort of like it's like Stephen King doesn't know what arc you give a female character. Or
And
then
that it's realistic that, someone might overcome something and then eventually slide back into it, but it's not satisfying storytelling.
yeah,
Like, especially because, it's not like we followed Bev for, 20 years of her life and this eventually came back around. We time warp to the point when she is having the exact same character arc again.
well, I feel like it's like Stephen King does not know how to write women. You have this character, and it's like, oh, what is her job as an adult? Well, what would oh, well, she's a fashion designer, obviously. Which did not
That's
really
a
seem to fit with her character at all. Not that there's anything wrong with the fashion designer, it just did not seem like what she would do.
right.
It seems like Stephen King going, well, what can women do and be successful at?
What's a woman job?
Or like there's a kid who is, his whole arc is he's a hypochondriac, overcomes that, and he overcomes his mother who seems to have like Munchausen's by proxy, and then he reverts to being a hypochondriac, and he's married to a woman who seems to be doing Munchausen's by proxy on him. It's like, we already did this.
Right.
Don't. It's not interesting to just relive these arcs again when they already. And the whole...
It's like he wrote his own The Force Awakens, and then made it part of the same book. Like, they're not even separate volumes.
If somehow A New Hope was constantly cutting to a Force...
Yeah, like if it was just intercut with The Force Awakens.
Like... And the whole cosmic element was dumb. Like, I'm so glad they cut that out of the first movie. It's not in the second movie either. They, like, wink at it in the second movie, but it's not really in the first movie at all. Because it's like... I'm not reading it so I can get some tiny little aspect into the Stephen King metaverse. I want to read an independent novel.
Right.
This is not advertised as being part of the Dark Tower. I'm not reading it for the Dark Tower. It's not the worst of his books to do that. Like, the worst of his books that does that is Insomnia, where it's like this 800-page book that exists for this tiny plot element in the Dark Tower series, and I'm like, it needs to exist independently of that Dark Tower series if you're going to have it be independent. Like,
yeah,
like,
the only things that should exist to serve the Dark Tower series are actual installments of the Dark Tower series.
Yeah. Also, like, it's weird that this all-powerful cosmic entity, if you have this all-powerful cosmic entity that is defeated by a group of small children, it's, even if they are being helped out by another cosmic entity, it's a little much. Like...
So, yeah, like, doesn't he show up, like, once every couple of decades? Why didn't this happen before?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be especially difficult.
Like, honestly, like, Kim and I were talking about this off camera, and, like, just make it so Pennywise only feeds on children. Child's fears are more physically small and vulnerable, and his way of dealing with adults is they just cannot perceive him. He kind of can mentally push them not to notice what he's doing. He can probably have some mental influence over seek harm to children. Like, if an adult legitimately doesn't like children, he can do a first evil them to act as his cat's paws against the children, but he cannot actually harm adults. He can easily be physically overcome by an adult. He's ultimately his ultimate victims have to be children.
And yeah, while we're talking about one thing, if you want to do the adult angle, which you probably just don't do that, but if you wanted to do, if you wanted to do the adult angle, then the way that you can change it up is by having they have a bunch of kids that they care about. For the most part, they're actual children. For some of them, it could be like they have like a nephew or something. Like maybe some of them aren't married, whatever. But the point is, they have these kids they care about, and like they realize that these kids are being hunted by it, and they cannot confront it directly, right? Because part of the horror of it could even just be that, like, if they could, then it would not actually be difficult for them to fight at this point. They've done it before. They're much more stable and confident now than they were at the time. But it cannot be perceived by adults. They cannot properly see him. They might notice he was there afterwards. They might remember, like, oh yeah, he was literally right in front of me. I, like, stepped past him. But they cannot properly perceive him because they are adults. Also, wow. Finally triggered the Zerg rush here.
I don't think we're going to survive this.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find the surface access doors that let us restock on stuff. So we're down to the really bad guns right now.
Ironic that you complained about that.
I mean, they added it because it was necessary. Right? Like, I complained that they used a bad solution, but that doesn't mean the problem they were addressing wasn't real.
Final death.
I don't know how the crossbow works against these things, but I guess we may as well try. Yeah.
It's fine. It's just more opportunities for us to talk about it.
Hooray?
Hooray!
I mean, the main takeaway, which is not to say that this is the only thing of value to say, but like I think the main takeaway from discussions of it is that it's from Stephen King's cocaine period, and it's pretty overrated. Like, it shows.
You want to hit the pipes so it'll break your fall.
Yeah, I was trying to do that last time, and I failed. First-person platforming, because, what sewer level would be complete without a jumping puzzle? Yep, there we go. Okay, But yeah, it is, it does have some really cool ideas in it, sure, but it's a travesty of basic storytelling mistakes that, it is absolutely no surprise that Stephen King was coked out when he wrote it, because the lack of self-control is just extremely evident. It is incredibly indulgent in the focus that it gives to the adult characters, whose only purpose, that entire half of the story, so far as I can tell, is to indulge Stephen King's ego by making it more apparent that, the adult version of one of these characters is basically just him. Is a writer and such.
He denies that. He denies that Adult Bill is him. He says it's based off a different writer, but I'm like, I don't believe you.
And especially because, writing 1,200 pages of self-insert fanfiction is the kind of thing you do when you're on cocaine.
Stephen King shows up in the second movie, and I thought he was going to be in form of Pennywise, because they had just done that with a different character. I was like, this is going to be another form of Pennywise, isn't it? And he was just a regular guy. I was like, oh. I feel like the best like I said, the best version of it is the first. There's still stuff I think I would tweak. I think 7 characters is too many. I would cut at least 2 of them.
Really, I mean, it is a story about a couple of bullied kids in a small town who, are then stalked by this fear monster, and that's a very local story. Which, obviously I've oversimplified it a bit there. It's not as simple and one note as that one sentence summary was. But, that's 80% of its core concepts are in there. And that's a story that wants to be compact. So, 5 characters is even pushing it a little bit. A power trio of 3 probably would have been sufficient. Although, you do sort of get into who do you want to cut, and at that point, you are starting to cut some real flesh off the bone if you cut too many of these characters. So 5 could possibly work, and I'm rambling more than a little here, but whatever, we're in the sewer level.
So you have Bill, that's your main character. Obviously you keep him. What I think you do is I think you make Stan, Eddie, and Richie one character. I don't think there's any reason a hypochondriac can't also be funny or and Jewish. There's not any reason for them to be 3 separate people. You can stack stuff on. People have more than one character trait, as it turns out. I think you just make them one character. Then I think you make...
We've recently discovered in lab tests on rats that people... we've recently discovered in lab tests on rats that you can have more than one personality trait.
Yeah, it's a big shock. One of the issues is that the outsider character gets introduced to this group 3 times with Ben, Mike, and Bev. I think you just have Mike and Bev be part of the group from the start, and then have Ben join the group. It also helps with Bev and Mike kind of feeling tokenistic. Like, Bev feels like the girl, and Mike is the black guy, and it feels really awkward. So I think you just have them be part of the group from the beginning, and then Ben is the outsider who gets introduced later.
Yeah.
And because, like, it makes sense, like with Mike, like, it's just, like, Stephen King always, like, he feels like a well-meaning liberal, but it sometimes feels like he doesn't know what to do with characters who aren't, like, straight white men.
Like, yeah, like...
with the stuff he writes about, like, with the gay character, the one gay guy who gets killed at the beginning, it's like, it feels like it's written by somebody who considers themselves an ally to gay people, but it also feels like it's written by somebody who has heard of gay people and approves of them, but has never met a gay person in real life.
Which, and I mean, when you're specifically Stephen King, I can imagine, you know, sort of feeling the need to include people of, you know, various marginalized demographics, because, like, you have such incredible influence that, you know, I could see him feeling the need to try and do some good with that. But
like with Bev especially, you run into, she feels like the girl, and part of that is from her being, that tends to happen when you have a group and there's only one girl in the group. But, like, even in the movie, which is the best version of it, she ends up getting kidnapped, even though it doesn't make any sense for her to be the one kidnapped by Pennywise. Like, she had just overcome her fear. She should be the least vulnerable to it at that point.
Bev is also the one where, like, Stephen King should have had the easiest time, you know, getting access to an actual member of the demographic in question to sort of sanity check while he's doing, like, you know...
Like, I get why you want to have one of the characters be kidnapped to raise the stakes, but I don't think having it be Bev was the right choice. I feel like your hypochondriac, who is... Well, the thing with the hypochondriac is you have him also overcome his fear. So if you do that, you can't have him be kidnapped by it. I think if you have, like... I think, like, you'd want one of the characters to be, like, especially a scaredy cat, and they have not overcome their fears by the final confrontation, and they're the one who gets abducted. That makes the most sense, rather than defaulting to, oh, well, obviously the girl gets kidnapped. But you also can't have them have overcome it by the time Pennywise comes after them, because it makes sense you want to raise the stakes. But it gets you into kind of awkward territory, because it did not make sense at all in the movie.
Yep, I cannot fight this thing in melee.
We're almost out of bullets.
And, like, this thing is introduced as, like, a boss fight in, like, the previous room. And then in this room, there are, like, 5 of them just wandering around. Like, feels very strongly like they are fishing around for a way to keep things interesting for a 5th sewer map, and for some reason it doesn't seem to have occurred to them.
There's another one on your right. Don't go too far down. There's one on the right.
Saw that one. Turning around now. There we are. Yeah, for some reason it doesn't seem to have occurred to them that maybe the answer to how to make the 5th sewer level map interesting was to not have a 5th sewer level map.
I also think this is more of a problem in the movie. I think you just have Bev and Bill end up together. Like, they tried to make Bev-Ben a thing, and I don't think it worked. Especially in the movie, they kind of set it up like, oh, Bev and Bill are going to be a thing, and then they just forget about it in the second movie. Like, I can imagine, like, having your sequel just have Bev and Bill are married and they have a kid, and that's sort of, like, the focus.
Yeah. But you obviously you want the one of the kids or the kid if it's just the one who is in danger in your adult timeline. You want that to be very directly related to Bill because, you know, that is drama.
Like, one thing they did well in the first movie was it is an interesting array of fears that you get from kids. In the book, they're all just kind of scared of, like, movie monsters, and it's like nice movie monsters he turns into, which isn't very interesting. In the movies, you get, like, this... So you have, you've got, I'm gonna have to pull up the list of characters again, sorry. Like, you've got some characters who've kind of got, like, fears of, like, monsters, or, like, the sort of random fears that kids get. Like, Eddie is afraid of... Not Eddie, Richie is afraid of clowns, and, you know, Stan is afraid of that weird painting in his dad's office. Those are both sort of, like, silly fears, but they're the kind of fears that, you know, kids have. They get afraid of stuff that isn't actually scary. It makes sense. Then you have, like, Ben is afraid of... He doesn't have a specific fear, but the thing that spooks him out is the pictures of the kids after they got blown up in the factory in the 1900s. You have Ben and Mike's fears. You're getting steadily more grounded in the fears. Bill's fears about his brother being dead. Mike's fears about his parents who died in that fire at the club. And then you have Beverly, and her fear is the most, like, present and real because she's afraid of her abusive father. So you have this nice range of fears that I think is good for the movie, and it's like how a monster like Pennywise would operate. Whereas the book it's just movie monsters, and it's not super interesting.
It's not super interesting, and it's also, it feels dorky, like, you know, this fear monster, this soul devouring horror, and, you know, it turns into, like, fucking Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, Dracula's cool and all, but he ain't that scary. It's a Nosferatu.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, we're finally getting into the right general neighborhood here. Which is good, because I'm on my last legs here, in terms of both bullets and patience.
But, like... There's there's a good novel in it. It just has so much extra added. Like, cut down the number of characters.
Cut down the number of characters. Cut out the adult half entirely. Which, you know, I have hypothesized about how you might be able to salvage that part, but even then I'm not...
Honestly.
Yeah, it's unnecessary, and I'm not super confident in it. Like, you know, if you do want to do something about the horror of, you know, your child being preyed upon by a monster that you cannot directly fight or even perceive, that you can't really defend them against, then it kind of feels like that's probably best off as its own thing. It doesn't need to be tied directly to it. And, yeah, there's also the scene that everyone who has read the book knows what I'm talking about. Which,
yeah, cut it out.
Yeah, cut that scene. It is absolutely baffling that that scene is pure cocaine. Like, there's no other explanation for it.
And that you have, like, a certain amount of protection from editors. we found where the line is, and this is it. We're cutting this out. That it's just there's no excuse for it. Another thing is, like, he's got 7 characters. He's talked about how they're, like, 7 people bullied kids. And he has stuff about homosexuality in the book, because there's the guy who gets hate crime. He gets killed in a hate crime. But it never apparently occurred to him that, like, an archetypal bully kid in the 1950s would be an effeminate kid who might be gay. Like, that's a very obvious archetype. And it apparently, like, there were gay people in the 1950s. They didn't get invented, like, recently. Like, so having one of them be actually gay, like, and people have tried to make the argument that Eddie is coded gay in the book, and I don't really, god damn it. We're never getting out of these sewers, are we? I feel like the Anarch equivalent of Prince should not be also a feudal title.
Yeah, the Anarch equivalent of a prince should be less equivalent. Alright, so that, ladies and gentlemen, was the fucking sewer level.
Oh, thank you, God. Unfortunately, we still seem to be driving through sewers. Like, we're not out of the sewers yet.
I mean, the sewer can only go on for so long.
I mean, you say that, but we were in the city of Dreadful Night at one point.
I mean, yeah, the amount that it can go on is admittedly the circumference of the Earth. But hopefully it won't go on that long.